Revelation chapter 13. I will read this first and then comment. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the names of blasphemy. The beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth was as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth to blaspheme against God, to blaspheme the name and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations, and all that dwell upon the earth and worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and faith of the saints. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. And he exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, which deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell upon the earth, they that should make the image of the beast which had the wound of the sword and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Now the commentary. When it says the images that we're talking about here in the Revelation, we hear a beast out of the sea, a mouth of the lion, dragon gave power, beast out of the earth, and lamb slain. And what we're doing is looking to the heavens first to see this testimony, and then bringing it down to earth in relationship to the real people who will be part of this story. So when it says, I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise out of the sea, celestially the sea of glass would be where Cetus, the sea monster, is. This is the wet portion of the sky, and the sea monster is presumably within the sea. So Cetus can also be called a whale. That he has the Hebrew word tanium, which can mean whale or sea monster. So when we see him in the sea, we're supposed to see a beast that has risen above him, and the beast that has risen above him, what we see would be Taurus. In fact, the word beast here would mean the ox, and Taurus can be a female or a male. According to the history, it can be represented as either. But as a male, we see it has horns, but yet we don't see 7 heads and 10 horns. So it says, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. It is holding a relationship to Draco the dragon that has 7 heads and 10 horns. How do I know that? Well, Moses was schooled in the ways of the Egyptians, and the book of Revelation is actually doing a commentary telling the Christian take on the heavenly story and how it really represents Christ, as opposed to the book of the dead, which is speaking of the Messiah to come in some instances, but has gone through some ways that we might consider it to be idolatry or whatever with the pictures that they had. But anyway, there is a glyph within the Book of the Dead, which held within it a picture of a beast rising out of the sea, an ox rising out of the sea, and next to it in the upper left-hand corner, you actually do see a serpent with 7 heads. So this is the story of what we're supposed to be looking at. So Draco in the celestial heavens is the main dragon, and there are 7 heads in that. Draco has 7 serpents that were supposed to be connected with him. And all total, there are 6 serpents and Draco. There is Draco, Hydra, Hydrus, Serpentarius, and Hercules is holding 3 dragons. Now, we've talked about this a little bit before when we were talking about the ark within the celestial heavens, and that Draco is a constellation that's seen within the heavens, and Draco represents Satan. Draco holds stars. Draco itself means that it is representative of that old serpent that is to be cast down from the heaven. And the stars, the word when it says that he has 7 heads and 10 horns, the horns are actually translate to rays of light. So we would picture that could be the stars, and there are some interesting stars in Draco that seem to carry out the testimony. Rostobin means the head of the subtle serpent. Al-Wade is who is to be destroyed. Grumin means the subtle. Aganser means the punished enemy. Al-Dib means the reptile. Al-Athic means the fraudful. And Al-Asya means the bowed down. And we've talked a little bit about in the heavens how there is a king, and next to the king is this dragon, and how all of this was seemingly discussed when Zechariah was talking. Zechariah said, "Thus saith the angel of the Lord, protested unto Joshua." This was Joshua the high priest, who was supposed to be a sign for Christ who was to come. And what he says, "Thus saith the Lord of hosts," it says, "Hear now, O Joshua the high priest, thou and thy fellows that sit before thee, they are to be men wondered at. For behold, I will bring forth my servant the branch." Celestially, there are 2 branches of this heavenly testimony. In fact, in Genesis, in the beginning, God created. The word created means to split wood. And celestially, there are 2 branches of the heavenly theater. One is today's pole star, and the other was the ancient pole star. The ancient pole star was Thuban, and that was within Draco. And around Thuban, this pole was supposed to be pointing. And these 2 poles, according to the Babylonian creation myth, were at one time split. That this goes back to creation, they say, and that's the same thing we read in Genesis, that God had created that, which meant to split wood. So we see the 2 poles as having been split, and one pole was supposed to be the representation of Draco the dragon, and the other pole would be Polaris, and as time would take place, Polaris would become the pole star, and there was a king who would sit above that, and that was Cephas, the celestial king. Cephas means the branch, and so when Zechariah 3:8 says, "Hear now, O Joshua the high priest, thou and thy fellows that are before thee, for they are men wondered at, for behold, I will bring forth my servant the branch," it's really speaking of this name that Joshua had, that Joshua had the same name as Yeshua. It was really Yeshua in Hebrew, or Yehoshua, and that is the name of Jesus Christ. He goes on and he talks about a stone. He says, "For behold, the stone which I have laid before Joshua, upon one stone shall be 7 eyes, and behold, I will engrave the graving of, saith the Lord," and that's the Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh of hosts, "and I will remove the iniquity of the land in one day." We understand that by placing the 4 letters of the Tetragrammaton, the Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, in a vertical position, we get the image of a man, a little stick figure of a man, and that was supposed to represent when God said, "And let there be light," and this light of the name of God was placed upon this rock or the stone, which, as we shall see, will have a purpose within this war too. And so when Zechariah said, "And then take silver and gold and make crowns and set them upon the head of Joshua the high priest, And he spoke and said, "Thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, Behold, the man whose name is the branch. Then Yeshua or Yehoshua must be the name for the Messiah, who will also be the branch, like unto the king, Cephas, who's called the branch." Now, Scripture also speaks of an abominable branch, and that would be the other branch, which Draco the dragon was wrapped around the other pole. The constellation we're seen as golden apples of the tree, and Draco is the serpent wrapped around and hangs from the tree. And on the other side of the heavens, if you were to follow that pole to the southern pole, you would find that there is a bird called Apis, meaning the bird of paradise, that goes around that pole star, as to show that this was like the dragon who was upon the tree in Genesis. We saw it in earth, but the story was made within the heaven. And so as Isaiah comes on, he's saying, this is the purpose that is proposed upon the whole earth, that this is the hand stretched upon all the nation, for the Lord of hosts has proposed it, and who shall disannul it? And he is speaking of the flying serpent. He goes on and he says, "For out of the serpent's root shall come forth a cockatrice, and his fruit shall be a flying serpent." In fact, this whole thing had to do with the area of Philistia, which is now the Gaza Strip. So he's telling the people from Gaza Strip, don't rejoice that Ahaz is dead, but because one time you're going to have this flying serpent hold a relationship to you, and that's supposed to represent the Antichrist, who will become Satan incarnate. And it goes on in Isaiah, he says, this is the purpose of the whole earth, and it has to do with the flying serpent. Lucifer means shining star. Draco is a shining star group, and Lucifer is spoken against within Isaiah. So Isaiah 14:12 through 15 discusses the fall of Lucifer to the pit. "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thy heart, I will ascend into the heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit in the mount of creation in the uttermost parts of the north. I will ascend to the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High." And truly, we could see Draco at one time in the position was to the height of the heavens and above the king, because he was the pole star and so forth. But God's will went on and said, "Yet thou shalt be brought down to Sheol, to the uttermost parts of the pit. I will rise up against them and cut off from Babylon the name, the remnant, the son, and the nephew." People think, well, he's the king of Babylon. In a sense, yes, because Draco was the king of Babylon, and Draco was related to Babylon, that they had spoken of this serpent in the heavens as being their king. So their temples are made in relationship to this, as they had seen it as their king. So that God is saying, first, I'm going to destroy your area, which is Babylon. Then he says, I will make it a possession for the bittern and pools of water. And these things are getting ready to take place as Babylon will fall down. There are tunnels of the oil that are underneath, and in a coming scenario, we're going to see that Babylon will sink. Then he says, I will sweep it with a bassoon of destruction. Boy, that happened when the people who are now called ISIS went through. That was a different bassoon of destruction. First, there was the war and the gathering of the articles of Babylon, what we're supposed to see when Babylon goes down. And then he says, I will break the Assyrian in my land and upon my mountains under feet. And apparently what this is speaking of is another group that is not Babylon, that is supposed to relate to the Assyrian Empire. This may be ISIS, because God, within the coming prophecies, speaks individually of Syria, although Syria was part of Assyria. God is looking, and Assyria once conquered Babylon and once conquered Syria. We have to look for an individual entity, and that may be the people from ISIS. In the war scroll, it talks about the parties of this war will include the Kittim of Asher, and then we would have to think that the Kittim of Asher are going to be the ones that are also spoken of, that they will be Hopen of the children of Lot. So what we're seeing is that Asher will be brought into this war. We see that Ezekiel tells us that their bodies are going to be on the sides of the pit, and they will be part of this war, and apparently they will be surrounding the king of Syria and going after him, and they're also trying to help the king of Edom, Moab, and Ammon. But in the scenario, they are not trying to help the Edomites. They're only trying to help the children of Lot. So the king must have something that he's also trying to get rid of the children of Edom within this thing. The children of Edom would be, in this sense, considered to be the bad guys that Assyria is going to protect the king from, as opposed to, and also the king of Syria. And this we'll see as their dead bodies fall, and we see who's surrounding who's surrounded at the side of the pit, who the Assyrian army is supposed to be surrounded. It goes on and says, in God's will, I will kill thy root with famine, and thy remnant shall be slain. But thou art cast away from the sepulchre like an abominable branch, closed and slain, with those who thrust through with the sword, that go down to the stones of the pit as a dead body trodden underfoot. So who is supposed to be cast out of the sepulchre? Well, there is a sepulchre in which is called the Ark of the Covenant. It was also supposed to be a coffin, and the Antichrist, according to Isaiah 28, the water will overflow the hiding place, and the sheet is too short for the bed. If the Antichrist's body is upon the ark, which is in the hiding place, when the water overflows the hiding place, the water would raise to a level where it would be able to cast this body into the pit, because it is next to the Dead Sea, which is where the pit would be located, or the sea, and he will be rising out of the sea, and eventually, after many sequences of war, he will also be the one who will be cast down to the pit. First, he is the blind who will lead the blind to the pit, and Samuel, Satan's other name would be Samuel, meaning the blind god. And in these war series, his role is to cast people into the pit, or to lead them to the pit. And that's very much what's happened in Israel as well. There's a Judas goat. The goat that would lead all the others to the slaughter was called the Judas goat. All the other goats would follow him and go into the slaughter place. He'd pull off to the side, and he'd be all right. So that's what's coming in this coming war. It says, they shall gaze at thee and say, is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake kingdoms, that made the world as a wilderness, and overthrew the cities thereof? And that's his role, that he will be overflowing the cities and causing destruction in every place that he goes. So as we're looking to this man who is supposed to be this serpent, we remember that Philistia was told when King Ahaz is dead, for out of the root of the cockatrice shall come the flying serpent. And celestially, Draco was supposed to originally have had wings, and in creation, according to the Babylonian myth, he had the wings cut off, and what were the wings now became a little bear. And that will figure within our story of the book of Revelation as we go forward. And then it says, in Isaiah 35, it says, for in the wilderness waters will break out, streams in the desert, springs of water, in the habitation of dragons where each lay. And that is that the Antichrist is the dragon, and so is the great serpent, the dragon, which is Satan. So it will be Satan incarnate taking over the body of the Antichrist. We find when the king of Tyre comes forth, that what it's talking about, he is the anointed cherub that was good but wasn't, and that he was perfect in all his ways. That is Lucifer, and since Lucifer means shining star, and Draco is a shining star group, we see the relationship here. So as we're talking about these things, we're talking about events that are getting ready to come, and we're also recognizing that these have to do with parables. Parables were the secret sayings of the ancients, and when Jesus said, I will open my mouth in parables, Jesus spoke to his disciples, saying to them, who hath ears to hear, let him hear. In Masonic terms, that meant the initiation, and apparently the disciples were initiated in the book of Enoch as kings were all over the world, and the book of Enoch was part of the scriptures that are held by the Dead Sea. It was not doctored, as people say. It was in perfect form. So when it says, and the disciples came and said unto him, why speakest thou into parables? He answered, because it's given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given. Gather ye first to the tares, bind them into bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things that have been kept secret from the foundation of the world. And so what this is speaking of, it goes on, it says, the Son of Man shall send forth his angels. They shall gather out his kingdom all things that offend, and them which do iniquity, and cast them in the furnace of fire. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. This is by the Dead Sea, where the pit of hell shall be opened, and when the pit of hell is opened, these people are going to fall into the furnace of the fire. And when it's talking about the gathering of the wheat into my barn, this will be the people who are the tribes of Israel that will be gathered into the temple of God, underneath the temple, and is where paradise is located. And that also at one time was a barn that King David had discovered when he went and found the foundation stone in the past. The book of Enoch identifies the place of burning as being in the valley of the Dead Sea. It is here that hell shall open its jaws and devour the sinners in the presence of the elect. In book of Enoch, chapter 61, it says, I saw there the host of the angels of punishment going, and they held scourges and chains of iron and bronze. And I asked the angel of peace who went with me, saying, to whom are these who hold the scourges going? And he said to me, to their elect and beloved ones, that they may be cast into the chasm of the abyss of the valley. And the valley that shall be filled with their elect and beloved. The days of their life shall be at an end, and the days of their leading astray shall not thenceforward be reckoned. In those days Sheol shall open its jaws, they shall be swallowed up therein.